Coca-Cola products for non-alcoholic drinks. We also have hot beverages aboard on these chillier days, like coffee and 3 different kinds of tea, hot chocolate, and some hot apple cider.
Did you mean that 2 popcorns?
Yeah. As we get the tour started here, pulling away from the waterfront here on Seattle, which used to be Seattle's port, the working port, before it moved to the south end to the bay back behind us. Very nice and orderly, but that wasn't always the case here on the waterfront. Previous to World War II, these piers all had different names, numbers, and letter designated. Realized that was not going to work for them and their cargo, so they helped us rename, reorder, in some cases rebuild these piers into the nice orderly system we kept when they left. Dock up alongside these long piers, offload their cargo into those warehouses, to an engine, and off they go across the country. That very wide sweep that you came across to get to our docks used to be called Railroad Avenue out Alaska Way, and previous to that it was a whole lot of railroad trestles. The coastline used to actually go up to First Avenue, all of this new waterfront was built in over the course of the 20th century. Now directly off our starboard side is a legacy of our changing waterfront. That's Pier 59, that long dark green building with white frame windows. That was brought in 2015. She was found in a fisherman's net, but she had some other issues they couldn't figure out until they finally determined she had asthma. She's the only sea otter we've ever found that releases a puff of mist. She's been trained to inhale at that point in time, treat her asthma attack, and continue on its way. Last time I was at the aquarium not too long ago, she hadn't had to use the inhaler in a couple of years, so it works out pretty well. Great things, there are over 80 local farms represented in the market. There's also 200 artists who have stalls and stores there. Now, if you go to the market, which I highly recommend, visit more than that street level. The street level has the oldest existing Starbucks and the guys that throw the fish, but if you only go to that street level, you're missing literally 80% of the market. There are 4 more levels down below. A pound of onions reached the equivalent of $35 per pound. Farmers decided that's not how they wanted to be represented. They cut out those middlemen, started bringing their products directly down there into town from the corner of Pike Place and Pike Street. All of those permanent structures were built around the existing farmers market. It's been in continuous operation since 1907. Now just up ahead of us is a large gray building, mustard yellow bottom borders, a big red E's on top of it. One of my favorite 6-month-long World's Fair. They ended up housing exactly 0 of them as they opened 2 weeks after the fair closed. Now under a good amount of debt, they had to scramble to come up with something to get the poor housekeeping had to deal with this for 20 years before they finally stopped the practice in the 80s. Talking about use the handrails. Now down in front of the needle, you can see this green hill with the 2 concrete walls running through it, a big orange spiky thing on top of it. This is Olympic Sculpture Park. It's an extension of the Seattle Art Museum, or SAM as it's generally called. It's open every day of the year from 30 minutes before sunrise to 30 minutes after sunset. It's completely free to the public. It was originally designed as an overflow valve for sculptures that were too big to keep in the downtown location of the Seattle Art Museum. Now it's a destination spot for sculptors. That idea is becoming ingrained in Seattle's community, and to this day we have more parks and green spaces per capita than any other city in the United States. Spots that are filled with loose product. It's currently being loaded with Seattle's largest export by volume, which is cattle grain freight from the Midwest. All the grain is brought in by trains up and over the Rockies and Cascade Mountains. They put it in those 68 grain elevators, which is a giant concrete structure back on shore. They then use conveyor belts to bring it up and along an apparatus on Pier 86. And then they just gravity feed it down into the holds of bulk carriers like this. That very far chute that back hole right now. wild Alaska pollock. They also use to make fish oil. Now, wild Alaska pollock is technically a cod, but that's really only because in the 70s the fishing industry spent millions of dollars to have a re-taxonomy and actual true wild versus just cod. Cod is actually cod, most not cod, wild Alaska pollock as well. Busiest embarkation for the United States. We have 299 cruises leave our bay this cruising season. Look up their prices and compare them to other waterfront properties in the greater it's incredibly susceptible. Elliott Bay Marina here. We're going to be entering the Puget Sound. I'll explain those terms in just a moment, but I will say if you're out on the decks and you have a half of the brim, make sure it's on. They're pretty amazing. We have the largest ferry system in the States, one of the busiest in the world. Now that shelf is fairly large. Those markers designate where that channel begins. Have a vessel, and that sounds like a great way to exist for you. I would recommend getting on the wait list here at Shell Shoal Bay. They have 350 slips. The next one will be available sometime in the next 3 to 5 years. That's about how long the wait list is in this marina. There are many marinas around here. All of them do have wait lists generally. And that's because the life of a California sea lion is rather brutal. During the summer months, they engage in what are known as the Beachmaster competitions. Now, the Beachmaster competitions are how male California sea lions establish breeding rights. They gather on beaches of Southern California and Northern Mexico, and they beat the tar out of each other to establish dominance. Winners get a little bit of beachfront property and breeding rights. Losers, they gather together by the thousands. That's because we are now in the shipping canal, and there's a speed limit on the shipping canal. All vessels have to move at 7 knots, and that's to help control the wakes. As we get into the lakes, there's a set level for most of the docks. There's a lot of floating docks. Not throwing a wake helps the businesses and the houses and things that are built on those docks stay stable and not have issues. They eventually had a coffee service for their boat rentals, because usually when you rented a boat, it was early in the morning and cold. Pretty soon the coffee sales eclipsed the boat rental sales. They did some business changes, eventually went fully into food service. If you type Giants.com into your search engine, you will get the webpage of the New York Giants, the football team. The other one is the Tampa Bay Rays. If you put Rays.com in your... and that's where the name comes from. Now, I'm going to turn you over to the captain here in just a couple of moments to tell you all about the area we're in and the locks and locking process. Before I do, I want to point out one more thing, and that is this bridge coming up in front of us. This is the Railroad Bridge, Burlington Northern Railroad Bridge number 4. It's also known as the Shell Shoal Bay Bridge. It's a counterweight drawbridge. It's one of my favorite things on this tour because it is so well designed and constructed. That counterweight hanging off the end of the structure is 50,000 tons, which translates to an even 1 million pounds. That bridge is so well designed and constructed. They use a 1 horsepower engine to raise and lower the bridge, and if for some reason that isn't working, there is actually a hand crank they use and have used.
Right now the large locks are closed. They're doing some routine maintenance and repair on those, which means all of the vessel traffic has to be going through the small locks. And because it's seen increased traffic, it sometimes slows us down. So always a treat when we time it right. Of course, the difference between the large locks and the small locks is their size. They operate pretty much the exact same way. Wide, so we just barely fit into the small lock chamber. Usually when you park in the parking lot, you have more room between your cars and the cars next to you than we've got in the lock. So just be aware of that as we make our way into the chamber. We can occasionally bump the walls. Because this is a big boat and those are reinforced concrete walls, if I do touch the walls, it can be a little bit jarring. I'll do my best not to make contact with the walls, of course, but it does happen. There's a fair amount of current coming from the spillway dams. And Not too much wind today, but sometimes the wind can be a factor as well. So as we make our way into the locks, just be careful if you're standing up or walking around. And it's going to force water from the higher elevation to the lower elevation. So basically what's going to happen is that there's going to be a flow of water from the lake to our chamber. That's going to fill up the chamber with water from the lake. The chamber fills up. Naturally, we're going to want to balance out with the lake level in front of us. So gravity likes to keep water flat. And that's essentially what's going to happen. So our chamber is going to fill up with water. So we're at the same level as we're keeping with Washington in front of us. Once we're at the same level, the flow will naturally stop and they close the gate behind us. Instead of opening up the pipes that lead from the lake to the chamber, they'd open up the pipes that lead from the chamber out to the lake, or out to the sound, excuse me. And by doing that again, they're going to allow gravity to force water from the higher elevation to the lower elevation, which in this instance would then cause us to lose some elevation. We drop down to sea level, which is of course where the Puget Sound is. Once that's done, they'd open up the gate. The Army Corps of Engineers, and they stay within about 2 feet of average height above sea level. They do that through the spillway dam, which as we're gaining some elevation here, you can see all the water flowing out to the right. That's the spillway dam. That's where the Army Corps of Engineers will either stop the flow of water altogether or allow the flow of water to make sure that the lakes don't drain too much and don't get too full. So because of the tides going in and out, lake levels staying the same by the Army Corps of Engineers between 1911 and 1917, so they're over 100 years old at this point. They were designed by a man named Hiram M. Chittenden and named for him. So officially these are called the Hiram M. Chittenden Locks. There's also the Botanical Gardens just off to our left. It's a fantastic place to go and check out. Their official name is the Carl S. English Botanical Gardens. They have plants from all over the world. Carl S. English was a botanist as well as a groundskeeper here, and he would collect plants, species from sailors as they were returning from their global adventures. He'd plant them at the Botanical Gardens, and as a result, there are over 300 different species of plants from all over the world. Maybe not so much this time of year, but if you're back in the salmon run season, there's a salmon ladder where the fish will make their way from the salt water back up to the fresh water.
Water lake of Lake Washington, which we won't actually go to today, but we'll get to about the halfway point. This particular channel, the military using it as a vestige, not strategically sound, with the entire Pacific Fleet looking all of the dock space out away from our local boaters. And there are a lot of us. There are more boats per capita here in Seattle than any other city in the United States. We have thousands of miles of coastline. It's over 3,000 miles of coastline, which includes the entire Puget Sound, along with the ocean coastline out of the west coast. Structure around the lakes. A lot of the houseboat owners around here will actually take them off of their docks and drive them out during some of our bigger holiday periods. 4th of July and New Year's, we do fireworks shows out off of the lake. You can take your entire house with you if you want to go watch the fireworks. It is owned by fishermen and for fishermen. Any working fishing boat has precedence over private vessels, and for a long time, no private vessels were actually allowed in the marina. It was for working fishing boats only days over here. Those docks are also open to the public during daylight hours. If you want to check out some of the fishing boats and things, it's a great place to come down. You can walk right by the boat. Now, currently we're going under the second of 4 bridges we're going to go under on this tour. We did the railroad bridge earlier. This is the Ballard Bridge. As precedence over automobile traffic. At 44 feet, it's a fairly low drawbridge. That is the second most drawbridge open on the west coast. It averages about 32 to 35 times per day they open that bridge. Anytime a vessel comes through, they will stop traffic. Over the weekends, they will put a choir on board. We will sail to just outside of various public parks and gathering places. The choir will perform. We go out of various places here in the Seattle area. This year we've expanded a little bit more. We have one sailing going out of Tacoma, one out of Edmonds to the north. All of that is capped off by the parade of boats, with which all of our vessels, plus a large number of decorated private boaters, will do a parade up and down the canals here. Water right now, not fresh water. Up ahead of us, you see a large silver building. That's King County Research Labs. They're responsible for monitoring the water quality levels here in the lakes, the canals, and out into Elliott Bay. That also represents roughly where Salmon Bay ended, and a body of water, or its trickle of water known as Ross Creek. Now, Ross Creek is no longer here. What is here is the Fremont Cut. And like I said, this is the Fremont Cut. We carry a number of their products, but they make something that we don't carry, mostly because it's fairly rare. All of those casks of whiskey on those boats will go to various parts of the Pacific Ocean over the entire fishing season. We'll experience different temperatures and different oceans. Those whiskeys, that whiskey will age over that time. We're open this 52 times in one day. Absolutely astounding times I had to open. Now, since the weather's not too bad, I would like to demonstrate just how close we get to the bottom of this bridge. If you're out on the docks or out on the decks, especially the stern deck, you can look up and see just how close our radar gets to the bottom of this bridge. No matter how many times I do this, I hold my breath every time. Now, if you look over up our left-hand side, you're going to see a large olive green structure. It's got 3 stories. That's the Aurora. That's a houseboat. It has an engine. That whole structure pulls off the dock 5,000 square feet. I mentioned that because if you look off the right-hand side, we're going by one of our floating home communities. Floating homes are exactly that. They're homes on a floating platform. They are connected to all city utilities, water, water, sewer, power, all of those things. They do not move unless you attach them to a tugboat and take them somewhere else. A whole lot of effort involved with that. The other major thing about floating homes is you pay property taxes on floating homes. The rough rule is, wherever the shadow of your home hits the mud underneath you, that's roughly what you pay property taxes on. You know, upwards of 2,500 floating homes here on the lakes and canals. We have this particular kind of industry here. That gas is used mostly for street lights here in Seattle, and the first 43 gas-lit homes were also fed by that. It was a super fun site for quite a long time. It was built in the late 1970s. It's still there are some areas that are still getting cleaned up. And we also have some fairly inclement weather to shoot. Generally, when you're shooting film, you want to use as much natural lighting as possible because it's free. Now, Sleepless in Seattle itself took place between December and February, according to the script. They decided to shoot here in Washington, but not shoot in the winter. They decided to shoot in springtime, get some longer days, more natural light, maybe get some of our naturally inclement weather. People in the history of the city that have ever paid to make it rain here. Also, with the advent of better viewing technology, if you get a copy of the movie, filming out here on the lake, apparently every time they go cut, everybody stripped off their winter gear, they were all in bathing suits, and they would jump into the lake. International runway, we have seaplanes taking off and land here on the lake. That was an effort to help maybe kind of clear some area on the lake for those seaplanes. It turns out humans are drawn very nicely to blinky lights, so they will gather around those blinky lights as they take off, and it makes things even worse sometimes. So as you're standing on the living room floor, you would technically be chest deep in the lake. The newest ones are starting getting completely submerged basements. So you get 4 stories out of 18 feet off the lake. This is pretty ingenious. How they went from the 2,500 in excess of 2,500. Now we're coming up on Lake Washington's oldest business. Just up off of the left-hand or port bound, you're going to see the dry docks of the Lake Union Dry Dock Company. There's these U-shaped structures. There's a blue one and a gray one just past this large blue-hulled vessel. Now, Lake Union Dry Dock Company was started in 1919, 2 years after the locks were opened. Now, the reason they're the oldest company here on the lakes is because they played both sides of Prohibition previous to the Great Depression. By boat, came to the dockyard and said, hey, we need some fast boats for no particular reason. To which the dry dock company said, absolutely, it built them some very fast boats. Very soon after that, here come the authorities, the Coast Guard, and the police saying, hey, we need some fast boats. We know you built some boats for the other guys, and we need you to build us faster ones. Which they did, without getting in trouble in any way, shape, or form. They got paid by both sides. And Fred Hutch Cancer Center was started by some very, very smart people, one of which, one of the original founders, was actually the first person to successfully do a boat area. It's a great place to go. They basically, as you wander through the exhibits, trace the history of this area from prehistory all the way up to the modern age. This area of Lake Union, way back in the early 20th century, was the original Boeing plant as well, as where Boeing started its original airplane facility building seaplanes.
Well, thank you so much, Kit, for that wonderful tour. I hope everybody enjoyed it. He always does such a fantastic job for us. Today was certainly no exception. Lots of great stuff to see. A really nice day to see all of it. A full day here without any rain. It's a really nice tour overall, so I hope you enjoyed it. Now, as a reminder, Kit is not only our tour guide, but also our deckhand, so he's going to go down and tie up the boat one more time. Believe me, it's no easy task. Our waterways are constantly changing, especially with this tour. There's so much to see that's constantly changing with vessels going in and out of the locks. It takes a lot of work to put together a fun and informative tour the way that Kit did.